So hello everyone. Today, as Evan introduced, we will present our early research results from a project where we focus on farmer field business school approach and which is linked with Savings and Loan Association. We will be presented together with Stanley and my name is Haki Pamuk. This project is a collaboration between CARE Tanzania, Biodiversity and SEAT Alliance, and Wagner University and Sokoine University of Agriculture. So there are many other co-authors that involved in this research in the process and spent quite a bit time. So let me, since I am the last speaker, perhaps I should be the one a little bit running and then really in a hurry. Uh, so we started with a motivation, a general motivation about how we can use a community-based approach to upscale the adoption of climate smart agriculture practices among smallholder farmers in rural areas. And we specifically actually use farmer field business schools approach of the CARE Tanzania. And related to that, we focused on whether the effectiveness of this approach improve when these farmers who are from farmers who are part of this farmer field business school approach are linked with also the savings and loan associations. And we will try to answer these questions by focusing on a very specific case study. It's a project called K&K of CARE Tanzania. The project promotes the use of climate smart agriculture practices for the smallholders, mainly women farmers in Iringa, Tanzania. When I speak about CSA practices, like we will mainly focus on the ones that are introduced by the project, which is soybean cropping in addition to maize, which is a main staple in the region. It's a new crop to the farmers. And the idea is promoting the use of these with crop rotation and intercropping, and also combined with residuum inoculation for nitrogen fixation. And the project is trying to promote this bunch of CSA practices through this FFBS approach, the business school approach, and the VSLAs. And in this presentation, we will present results on two things. The first is whether these actual practices are financially profitable. Stanley will touch upon this. And then I will take over again whether the farmer field schools and VSLAs promote the adoption of CSA practices. I will present the very preliminary results because our survey was delayed due to COVID-19. So we had it just last October, we had the data. So what do I mean by this community-based approach, the farmer field business school approach? It is mainly targeting women, but not excluding men farmers. So they are bringing together women farmers, and then they give them on-site agriculture trainings on CSA practices through demonstration plots in every village. But the difference of the approach from the classical farmer field school approaches is also follows a market-based approach by business trainings on collective marketing, business planning, and giving trainings on the importance of loans and how to use them. And it's also in the approach also an important part of the approach is gender trainings on equity issues. But we will not be mainly mentioning about this in our presentation, only we'll give a small result about it. But as I said, the project also encouraged the same farmers to use savings and loans to finance those adoption of the CSA practices, and it mainly makes it through the savings and loan associations. These savings and loan associations in the region, we know it from another study that is more or less 20 to 60 members, and 60% of the members are women again. So now I want to give the floor to Stanley. Maybe Evan, you can unmute it and I can mute myself.
Yes, uh, you've jumped once, right? Go back. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Haki. And yes, so I'm going to talk take you through the next three slides. And by now, I think you have a little bit of background of what kind of farmers we are dealing with, because I see what Ria and what Astrid mentions about in their study area. I think more or less some of these farmers share some of their characteristics. So in our study area, farmers, they are mostly smallholder farmer, and they use also raw input. And they have a limited access, of course, to these are some of these agricultural services that have been touched on, for example, extensions and finance. And as Haki said, our focus is on CSA practices. But what we see from this, from our study area, is that the adoption is a little bit on the lower side, is limited because of several factors. And in our study, we focus on when Haki mentioned K and K, it stands for we have 15 villages, and if you can see, look at the map, we have like some that are named with the green color and others that are on black or dark color. So we have 18 comparison villages, which are the black. These are like the control. The 15 villages that are in green color, they are the ones that implement what Haki just said, that kukua ni kujifunza. They are the ones that we have the farmers field business school approach, and the ones that introduce CSA practices. And in these, as Haki mentioned, we are dealing with those who are using their savings and sometimes their loans. So there are 2 to 3 loans and saving association in each of the villages. And what we see that in our study area, allowed most of them, like more than half, around 53%, they are in this what we call farmers FFBS villages. And that is in last year and this year. And what we see right now is that 48 still have saved, while 40 they are still receiving some of the loan from the village saving and loan association. Next slide. So I'm going to take you through the profitability, because as the other 2 speakers were talking through, I was seeing some of the constraints they were mentioning. And in our study, we wanted to know, okay, we may come up with some very nice recommendation, but the question at the end of the day is, will these farmers be able to implement these practices? Is it doable? So we had to look at what we call financial cost benefit analysis. And we collected data through what we call focus group discussions and key expert interview. And we focus specifically on the CSA practices that were introduced by the CARE through K&K. And we ranked through these practices and identify those that were coming the top priority. And these are 2 that we call intercropping and crop rotation. So as Haki mentioned, these 2 alternatives, they incorporate what we call maize and soybean intercropping and maize and soybean crop rotation. So the 2, when I mentioned something about ranking and prioritization, they were the main reason why they were ranked by the stakeholders is because of their role in reducing pathogen pressure, and their role also in improving the soil fertility through, for example, nitrogen fixation, and therefore help to improve the total productivity or total production per hectare. But what I need to mention here is when we are looking at the financial analysis, these 2 practices, farmer cannot implement them at the same time in the same plot, so they are mutually exclusive. Next slide, please. So here I present some of the results, and from this result, if you look at the figure on the right, you see we have incremental net benefit and the life cycle for these different practices that we have, because if you look at the table below, we have different CSA practices. We have crop rotation area maturing, crop rotation rate maturing, intercropping area maturing soybeans, and intercropping rate with the rate maturing soybeans. So these are intercropped with maize. But in the graph, the top graph, you can see that they have different life cycles. One, for example, is going up to 16, and another one is from 11 years. So you can see the life cycle is ranging from 11 to 16 years. This means when the farmers start implementing the practice on the farm until when they call it a quit and they introduce a new entirely different practice. So what we can see from this result is that farmers are adopting crop rotation practices. They usually report higher profitability than those who are using intercropping. But in all the 4 practices, we can say that, for example, the internal rate of return associated with those practices is higher, of course, than the discount rate, which is not included here. But of course, you can see the internal rate of return here tell us whether the practice is really profitable for the farmer to be able to invest on it. Now, what we compare the internal rate of return is with the existing discount rate. So in this study area, the discount rate was around 10%. So on overall, we can say that the adoption of these practices, all of them actually is profitable. But of course, we can see that the first two, they are really profitable because you have an internal rate of 200. So it's like 10 times profitability, even if they were to get a loan from a village saving and loans, or even from bank, they would still be able to pay without much problem because of the high return from these practices. But when you look at the last two practices, we have what you call the marginal profit, because the discount rate is like 10%, so it's like double or triple, and the second last is like 37, it's like 4 times. So they are all profitable, but we can say that they have the last two are not as profitable as the first two. But we can say in general that all the method had a slight payback period, and the payback period here is reflected by the profitability. So the higher the profitable practices, the shorter the payback period. So what we can say that all these practices that we are studying here, they all constitute what we call a promising investment option. Why? Because they yield a positive benefit for the farmer, especially notably the 2 years of investment, for example, in crop rotation. They can pay all the cost used in implementing the practice in full, and this is actually a motivation for farmers to adopt this practice, and actually even other farmers in the region. Now, from here, I hand over again to Haki to proceed with the presentation.
Now I will spend the last one minute to show you whether these actually the farmer fields. So we showed that these practices are profitable, but then what we want to see is whether really this approach could do it. So we collected data in 2018 as baseline and 2020 as endline from the project villages and the comparison villages. So we collect data 20 households from each village. So we reached 660 farmers in both baseline and endline surveys. And I will show you in the next slide results from our comparison. So I will look at 4 groups. The farmers that are part of a farmer field business school village, not using loans from VSLAs, farmers from not from a farmer field school business villages, but use loan from VSLA. So these 2 groups are our control groups. And I will look at then farmers from FFPS villages, which are not using VSLAs. And finally, we will look at the farmers from FFPS village and using loan from VSLAs. So this is our preliminary results. I want you to focus on this green and the orange bars. So the green bar, and these are the baseline results. So I show you the fraction of farmers produced soybean over the past season. And as you can see, for all groups in 2018, the soybean production was really low because it was not well known by the farmers, only a few of them. But afterwards, we see that actually the fraction of farmers that adopted the soybean improved significantly. About 30% of the farmers that are from farmer field business school villages, but not using loans from VSLAs, has adopted the soybean. And when we pass to the farmers who are also from farmer field schools, but now this time they are using also a loan from VSLA, we see that the fraction of farmers are even larger. So this shows us that actually the approach work, at least incentivize about half of the farmers when they are part of this approach. They are trained and they also use loans in their from the VSLAs. And we also see a similar picture, especially for the loan use for the fraction of farmers adopting rhizobium inoculation. For crop rotation and intercropping, we don't see the same results, but maybe it's normal because these practices, you don't need to finance your activities for crop rotation or intercropping. And many farmers already know about these technologies before. And our results are also robust to controlling for some additional controls, also fixed effects, some using regression methods. And we also find that this is interesting and requires further research, that the approach was less effective on female-headed households. And this is actually the opposite result. We were expecting the opposite. So the main of the conclusions, we see that the practices are profitable, but some financing needed for broader adoption and also knowledge. And we see that our preliminary results show that this farmer field school approach is actually effective when they also combine some kind of loans, so the farmers can get some small amounts of loans from the savings and loan associations for the practices that actually require a bit upfront investment, like inputs, seeds for soybean and the rhizobium. But still, we need further research on the approach, whether it changes access to loans from VSLAs and whether the gender roles in the households are changing. Thank you for listening us. I hope we are not very much over time. Evan, to you.